Then from the White House comes word that the Army has received news of signals of distress believed to come from an Army cargo boat 700 miles west of San Francisco. Presumably, this is another ship. Previously, we had word from the White House that an Army transport carrying lumber was torpedoed 1,300 miles west of San Francisco. Now, here are some of the first comments that we have gathered from congressmen. Veteran Senator Glass of Virginia says, "I suppose that this means war." And ironically, he added, "Of course, we're not going to surrender immediately without any effort to repel the attack." Senator Charles McNary, the Republican leader of the Senate, said, "I am amazed at Japan. I thought they had better judgment. I deeply regret the turn of events. Now the nation must unite in giving her a beating for her stupidity and aggression." That was from Senator McNary. Senator Hill, the Democratic whip of the Senate, says this: "The United States ought to use every means, every power to lick the Japanese, to lick them thoroughly and completely, and to do the job in the quickest possible time." Except for the bare announcements from the White House, there has been no further word. It's quite obvious that the American Navy and Air Force are taking counteraction against the Japanese. Once attacked, you do not stand on ceremony. The President has ample authority to send the Army and Navy into action when this country is attacked. Presumably a naval blockade of Japan has already been ordered, and other hostilities than the Japanese air attacks will be reported. In a case of this kind, with open hostilities and the United States clearly the target of offensive action, it can be expected that the President will go before Congress. There he will explain what has taken place, and unless unofficial speculation is wrong, he will ask Congress for a declaration of war. There is no doubt what Congress would do. It has been notable all along that congressional sentiment is much more united on the subject of Japan than it has been on European developments. But more than this, the United States itself is now the subject of definite attack. Let alone past sentiment, this would be enough to bring a united opinion in Congress. We return you now to New York. The statement has just been issued now by the State Department from Secretary of State Cordell Hull. It runs as follows. On November 26th, the Secretary of State handed to the Japanese representatives a document which stated the principles which govern the policies of the government of the United States toward the situation in the Far East, and setting forth principles for a comprehensive, peaceful settlement. At 1 p.m. today, this State Department statement continues, the Japanese ambassador asked for an appointment for the Japanese representatives to see the Secretary of State. The appointment was made for 1:45 p.m. The Japanese representatives arrived at 2:05 p.m. They were received by the Secretary of State at 2:20. The Japanese ambassador handed to the Secretary of State what was understood to be a reply to the American document of November 26th. Secretary of State Hull carefully read the statement presented by the Japanese representatives and immediately turned to the Japanese ambassador and with the greatest indignation said, "I must say in all my conversations with you, the Japanese ambassador," and this is Secretary Hull speaking, "I must say in all my conversations with you during the last 9 months, I have never uttered one word of untruth." Then Mr. Hull, referring to the Japanese note just handed to him, continued, "In all my 50 years of public service, I have never seen a document that was so crowded with infamous distortions and falsehoods on a scale so huge that I never imagined any government on this planet was capable of uttering them." The contents of the Japanese note is not given. Apparently it follows the example set by Hitler in the case of his own aggressions, in which he charges the victim of aggression with all sorts of faults. Now we have word that Secretary of War Stimson has just issued an order to all military personnel in Washington and throughout the country to report for work Monday in uniform.
the Japanese told us that our job was to build a section of the new railway from Siam to Burma. I especially remember one Jap engineer in charge of a working party. His favourite way of getting his orders quickly carried out was to chuck down iron rivets and bars from his perch on the top of the bridge, onto the heads of our officers and men working below. When the monsoon broke out with a 72-hour non-stop downpour, most of us prisoners were very nearly at our last gasp. The rains, which immediately turned the embankments and cuttings into quagmires, drenched us day and night and sent the death rate soaring. Almost at the same time, cholera broke out and decimated the crowded camps. You'd have thought that the Japanese, in their own interest, might have taken some steps to check the ravages of disease, but they didn't. Instead, they actually started a speed up. We had to work in shifts of 14, 20, and 36 hours at a stretch. We were practically naked by now, for the Japanese issued hardly any clothing. Weary and worn out, we used to lurch back to our huts to eat the rice and slush called stew, but often, in fact, nothing but a radish or bamboo root in boiling water. Then we'd relapse into exhausted slumber, wet and jammed on top of each other in leaky, windswept huts.
Bailey speaking. This is the Columbia Broadcasting System. WCCO Minneapolis. The United Press announces that it is ordering into operation on a 24-hour schedule all of its leased wire circuits throughout the country. The order was given to the American Telephone and Telegraph Company shortly after 2 p.m. to see that all newspaper and radio clients of the United Press, regardless of their normal hours of service, were hooked into the UP wire system immediately for continuing service until further notice. Now we take you back to the symphony concert by the New York Philharmonic Symphony Band. Here is a flash just received in our newsroom. Dateline, Washington. United States Army transport carrying lumber was torpedoed 1,300 miles west of San Francisco. Details on this news and other news that has been coming in on the Far East situation will be given to you at approximately 3:35 during the intermission of the New York Philharmonic concert. We return you now to the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. special news bulletin, the Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii by air, President Roosevelt has just announced. The attack also was made on all naval and military activities on the principal island of Oahu.
The Symphony No. 1 in F minor of a modern Russian composer Shostakovich, performed as the opening work on this afternoon's Philharmonic program, Artur Rujinsky conducting. Japan has attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and Manila, the Philippine Islands, from the air. The attack is developing. Today, Dean Taylor's usual commentary will be replaced by a further report on the Far Eastern situation. We pause now for 15 seconds. This is the Columbia Broadcasting System.
This is WCCO, studios in Minneapolis and St. Paul. The Twin City temperature 37 degrees. This is John Daly speaking from the CBS newsroom in New York. Here's the Far East situation as reported to this moment. The Japanese have attacked the American naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and our defense facilities at Manila, capital of the Philippines. The first disclosure of this news was made by Presidential Secretary Stephen Early by telephone at approximately 2:25 in Washington. I read the text of this historic announcement at a little after 2:30. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor from the air and all naval and military activities on the island of Oahu, the principal American base in the Hawaiian Islands. That was Secretary Early's message. Short while later, he dictated another message. A second air attack has been reported. This one has been made on the Army and Navy bases in Manila. And here's a last-minute Associated Press flash from Honolulu. A naval engagement is in progress off Honolulu with at least one black enemy aircraft carrier in action against the Pearl Harbor defenses. Secretary Early informed all correspondents and then rushed to the White House to be with President Roosevelt. As the announcement was made, the two Japanese envoys, Ambassador Nomura and Special Emissary Kurosu, were at the State Department. Columbia's correspondent in London, Bob Trout, heard the news for the first time from our report from New York. Up to that moment, or very shortly before then, the British capital had not been informed of the Japanese attack on the Hawaiian Islands and on Manila. In view of Prime Minister Churchill's recent pledge that a British declaration of war on Japan would follow almost immediately upon the outbreak of war between Japan and the United States, a British announcement is expected soon. Columbia's correspondent, Ford Wilkins, was put on the air in CBS's regular 2:30 news program on Sunday afternoon from Manila. He was cut off the air suddenly while he was talking about air raid shelters, possibly because of censorship. In communication with Columbia's radio station, KGMB in Honolulu, we heard here in New York that the Pearl Harbor base had been attacked and anti-aircraft fire was heard. A telephone message to the United Press from Fort Schaefer in Hawaii said that 50 planes attacked the island of Oahu. The planes are officially described so far as unidentified in these messages, although later reports that have come in from the press associations definitely identify at least two of these planes as carrying the emblem of the rising sun, the emblem of Japan. The Pearl Harbor attack reported by KGMB in Honolulu is said to have been carried out in other messages by 50 to 100 planes, and a half an hour ago it was said to be still continuing. The smoke of anti-aircraft guns rose over the Pearl Harbor Navy Yard. Heavy smoke also drifted up from Hickman Field in the Pearl Harbor area, apparently from fires, and witnesses said fires broke out on Ford Island. The main targets in this action by the Japanese appeared to be Hickman Field, which is the Army field, and the great naval base at Pearl Harbor, and several planes were reported shot down. Also, we've had a report from Honolulu that policemen and firemen were ordered in a radio broadcast to go to Army and Navy posts immediately. Major George Fielding Elliott, when this dispatch originally came in, pointed out that this may indicate that some of the Japanese resident in that area are being aids in this action by the Japanese against the shore areas, and the firemen and policemen may have been called up to stop any abortive revolutionary action in that area. Here's the first Associated Press dispatch from Honolulu. At least two Japanese bombers, their wings bearing the insignia of the rising sun, appeared over Honolulu at about 7:35 a.m. Honolulu time today and dropped bombs. As I told you a little earlier, these are the two planes of the reported 50 to 100 which have been definitely identified as wearing the insignia of the rising sun. Unverified reports said that a foreign warship appeared off Pearl Harbor and has begun firing at the defenses of that mighty fortified post. Reports also say that the Japanese bombers scored two hits, one at Hickman Field Air Corps Post on Oahu Island, and the other at Pearl Harbor, which set an oil tank afire. American anti-aircraft has set up a terrific din, and the sky also is filled with American battle aircraft. We have just heard that the Press Association dispatches, of course, are pouring in here. We've had a Washington bulletin received just a few minutes ago that disclosed an American Army transport